The end of the world is an idea that has sent shivers down the spines of humans from almost every culture throughout history. The Vikings pictured it as the battle Ragnarok between Odin and Loki, which ended with the destruction of the world. Another fight between good and evil was repeated in Zoroastrianism, with a combat between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, or the advent of the Buddhist messiah Maitreya. And then we have Hinduism, where the god Kalki will arrive riding on a horse to kill us all. Even the Jews believe in the apocalypse, but not the Christian one. They talk of the reconstruction of the Temple of Jerusalem and a divine rule headed by a Messiah, the Mashiach, who is most definitely not Jesus Christ. For example, we can see this in the Jewish Kabbalah, an esoteric interpretation of their sacred book, the Torah. Among its texts is the Zohar, which describes the Tree of Life, a symbol comprised by 10 spheres known as Sephiroth, each of which represents a different manifestation of God and revelation of His will. They also refer to the Tzimtzum, a cosmic explosion which gave origin to the world, kind of like the Big Bang, and then a second explosion, a pillar of fire which will bring an end to life on Earth and give rise to a messianic kingdom. But this will be the topic of a future video. For now, we will focus on the contents of the last book of the New Testament. Apocalypse means revelation in Greek. This cryptic book is very difficult to interpret because it's jam-packed with symbolism and trippy imagery. Its main theme is the end of the world as we know it, the victory of good over evil, and a final judgment after which our souls will be happy in heaven. Unless you've been an asshole, of course. Let's find out what it says exactly. The Apostle John, the youngest of the 12 apostles, was an old fogey towards the end of the 1st century when he started to write this account. He was living in isolation on the island of Patmos when God decided to reveal the future to him in a vision. The vision began with him ascending to the house of God. There, a voice told him that this was a message for the 7 churches of Asia Minor, the churches that existed at that time. The message was quite clear: worship God or face damnation. And that was because, in order to understand what we're going to talk about, we first need to know the historical context. It seems that these small Christian communities were being persecuted by the Emperor Domitian, who had self-proclaimed himself as God. The Christians led secretive lives and communicated through symbols and letters among the various communities. John was highly respected because he was the last survivor of the apostles, as in, this guy had actually been buddies with Jesus Christ. But the persecution of his followers was generating a huge apostasy, a renunciation of the creed. It seems that the goal of the book of Revelation was mainly to provide hope to these initial churches through the promise of a better world. John talks about a vision of Christ, radiant, surrounded by 7 candlesticks and holding 7 stars in his hand, the churches of Asia Minor. Jesus wore a golden girdle, his eyes were as flame, his feet like fine brass, and out of his mouth came a 2-edged sword. Then he told John to go through a door which was opened in heaven, for he was going to be shown the events that were to come. John enters heaven and sees God's throne, and on top of it a scroll with 7 seals. All around are 24 elders, and one of them says to John that only the Lion of Judah can read the scroll, and that it contains the history of man and the secret of all things. In addition to all this, John also sees 4 winged creatures: a lion, an ox, an eagle, and a being with a human face. Presently, a lamb covered in blood occupies the central throne. It is Jesus Christ who takes the scroll and begins to break the seals one by one. This unleashes the Great Tribulation, which would last for 7 years. In the book of Thessalonians, we are told of the day of rapture, which would take place before this tribulation, when the chosen ones would be taken from earth by God to remain next to him in heaven. This event will put an end to the era of the church.
Bye-bye.
Returning to the Great Tribulation, upon the opening of the first 4 seals there will appear the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. First will be a white horseman carrying a bow, and he will bring a peace like the world has never seen before. But watch out, because this is the Antichrist. Just like there is a holy trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, evil will also manifest in 3 forms: Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. It seems that this Antichrist will be a prominent political figure, a messiah bearing a message of peace, but a false one. The second horseman will be a fiery red and carry a great sword. This is war, a great conflict which will devastate the world. The third horseman will be clad in black and carry a pair of balances, representing a very long famine. And then the fourth horseman will be death, riding in on a pale horse. Many interpret this as a terrible plague that will kill 1/4 of the population. As the 5th seal is opened, John sees the martyrs of Christendom appearing. Those who were slain for their loyalty to God now cry out for vengeance against their killers. And they won't have to wait very long, because the opening of the 6th seal unleashes a cosmic upheaval. First, a great earthquake, then Then the sun will turn black and the moon the color of blood. The stars will fall down to earth and no mountains or islands will be left. The world is going straight up Schitt's Creek. But first, the angels will stamp seals on 144,000 people from the 12 tribes, so that these chosen ones will be unharmed. The opening of the 7th seal will be followed by silence, whereupon 7 angels will take 7 trumpets, and thus will begin the second judgment, which will be even more destructive, for each of these trumpets will bring new disasters. First, 1/3 of the earth will burn under a rain of fire, and next the seas will turn to blood. With the 3rd trumpet, a star known as the wormwood will fall from the sky. After that, the sun, moon and stars will lose their light. The 5th trumpet will open a crack in the abyss, from which will arise thousands of locusts, wearing iron armors and with tails that sting like scorpions. Their king will be Abaddon, a demon from the abyss. Everyone will wish to die, but they won't be allowed to just yet. The 6th trumpet will unleash the 4 angels of the Euphrates, who will kill another 1/3 of humanity with an army of 200 million riders. Their horses will have heads of lions with mouths that breathe fire. Many see here a meteorite shower followed by a massive meteor, like in the movie Armageddon. A cloud of dust will cover the sky, followed by disease and a great war over the earth's resources.
You want this cheese, fool?
Then God will send down to earth 2 witnesses, 2 prophets, to the city of Jerusalem. After bearing their witness, the beast from the abyss will slay them and expose their corpses in the streets to all the nations of the world. According to many, this is something that can only be understood in a globalized world with satellite communications. After 3.5 days, the witnesses will be resurrected and ascend to heaven. This will be followed by a great earthquake that will destroy part of the city, and the survivors will give glory to God. Finally, the 7th trumpet will open the gates of the temple of Christ, preparing the Parousia, the second coming of Jesus Christ. John sees a pregnant woman wearing a crown with 12 stars who represents Israel, but suddenly Satan appears in the shape of a red dragon, like King Ghidorah. But with 7 heads with 10 horns and a crown upon each head. It tries to devour the newborn child, who is Christ, but God saves him at the last moment. Next, the Archangel Michael arrives with his troops to fight against the dragon, only for it to be joined by a beast arisen from the seas representing the Antichrist, and also another fearsome beast on land, the false prophet, whose mission is to promote worship of the Antichrist by working miracles. It appears that this struggle is more based around propaganda than violence, with the goal of attracting the surviving humans. This Antichrist is described as another beast, also with 7 heads, 10 horns and crowns, but this time with body of leopard, feet of bear, mouth of lion, and given full authority by the red dragon to rule over all the nations of the world.
I picked the wrong week. Quit sniffing glue.
It seems that the prophet Daniel had also seen these creatures in his dreams and identified them as great empires, like the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. Perhaps this beast is meant to represent a great nation or group of nations opposed to Christian religion. It's also very likely that John wrote this thinking of the Roman Empire, which was making his life so miserable. Meanwhile, the false prophet is portrayed as a ram with 2 horns and the voice of a dragon, and seeking to garner people to its cause by branding them with the sign of the beast on their forehead or right hand, the infamous 666. We mentioned earlier that the first Christians used codes to avoid persecution. Perhaps the sign of the beast was the name of their enemy, Nero or Domitian, but in code. According to a theory proposed by author Robert Graves, the code would be the number, but in Roman numerals, which would reveal the hidden message. On the other hand, it has been found that other texts used 616, indicating that 666 could be wrong. Now back to the apocalypse. Jesus Christ is next to the 144,000 chosen ones, while the angels fight against the demons trying to conquer all the souls they can. They warn humanity not to adore the devil or his statue, and also announce the fall of Babylon, their hideout of diabolical perversion. After this, 7 angels appear, each bearing a cup filled with the wrath of God, which is about to be poured over the land. This is the 3rd judgment, the last plagues, which this time will affect everyone. The first cup will bring sores to those who carry the sign of the beast. Next, rivers and seas will turn to blood. Later, the sun will burn the unrepentant, and the 5th cup will be cast over the throne of the beast and plunge the world into darkness. But it appears that even after all this, many still haven't repented from their sins. The 6th cup dries the Euphrates, so that the army of heaven may march unimpeded. Where, you ask? To Tel Megido, where the Battle of Armageddon will take place. A great battle between all the forces of the world, which many interpret as the end of a third world war. Heaven opens up and Jesus arrives, riding triumphantly on a white horse and carrying a sword. He's come to whip the asses of Satan, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and all their stinking demons, allied with the rulers of several nations. In the end, Jesus wins and throws them all into the abyss, where they will remain in prison for 1,000 years. And then the last cup is poured, causing the largest earthquake ever known, which brings about the fall of all the nations of the world. Lastly, an angel reveals to John a bejeweled woman in the desert on a scarlet beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. This is the mother of harlots, Babylon the Great, who had been defeated. The 7 heads represented the 7 hills from which the woman ruled, and also 7 kings, 5 of them fallen, the 6th currently ruling, and the 7th yet to come. The beast is the 8th king, and the horns are another 10 kings who will rule next to the beast, to whom they will give all their power and support in the battle against Jesus. This is another way of saying that all evil and pagan nations will ally against Christ. The defeat of evil will bring about millennialism, which is the belief that in the future, Jesus Christ will rule over the world for 1,000 years. But don't get too excited yet, because after those 1,000 years, Satan will manage to break free and recruit to his cause the nations called Gog and Magog, and so Jesus will have to draw his sword once more to defeat him forever in a final battle. This will end with Satan being cast into a lake of fire and destroyed for all eternity. And, after all this excitement, we arrive at the final judgment, where all the dead will come back to life and appear before God, so that the actions of every person may be judged. And no surprises here, if you have been bad, you are cast down to hell. But if you've been good, then your name is inscribed into the book of life, and you may enter the celestial kingdom. And now, at the end of his vision, John sees a square, walled city made of gold descending from the heavens. This is the New Jerusalem, the Lamb's Bride, where the saved and the martyrs may dwell in peace, in a perfect world with no evil, no pain, and no movie spoilers. And so they will all live happily ever after. Well, except for those who are rotting in hell, of course. They're just screwed. And so, this is the book of the Apocalypse. Pretty bonkers, isn't it? What do you think? What does that beast from the oceans represent? The Roman Empire? That is what many people have interpreted, based on the 7 heads and 10 horns and the crowns. 10 emperors who persecuted Christians without mercy, from Caligula in the year 37 up to Domitian, who was ruler at the time that the book was written. 10 emperors, but 7 particularly influential ones. The view of preterism believes that this prophecy of the Apocalypse was already fulfilled with the fall of the Roman Empire, whereas futurists believe that it is yet to come. Some believe that the false prophet was Hitler or Stalin, and that World War II was the second horseman of the Apocalypse. Nowadays, some recognize the 7-headed beast in the European Union. Others believe that all this won't be something physical, but rather spiritual, an event that will make us all believe once again. But as we said earlier, I think that the key to the book lies in the age when it was written. John wanted to give courage to his followers, who were already suffering a kind of apocalypse for their creed, so they needed the promise of a final reward that would give meaning to their religion. And it seems that it worked, because in the year 313, Emperor Constantine I granted Christians their long-awaited freedom of worship with the Edict of Milan. Then we have the interpretation of the Protestant Christians, critical of the Catholic Church, which says that the harlot on the scarlet beast is none other than the church itself, since it is usually symbolized by a woman. The 7 heads would be the 7 hills surrounding Rome, and a church in Rome is clearly the Catholic Church. We also hear about 7 kings, and it just so happens that popes are, in fact, the kings of the Vatican, since 1929, following the Pacts of Letrán. Coincidentally, we currently have the 8th Pope King, but at least for now, he hasn't allied with 10 nations to destroy the world, so that's good news. It seems more likely that John was pointing to the Roman Empire as the beast, with paganism personified as the emperor. That happy ending opened the door to a great final redemption, which would encourage people not to leave the religion of Yahweh. John would die soon afterwards, and would never know that, several centuries later, Christianity would become the official religion of that great satanic beast. But hey, perhaps this apocalypse has occurred already, and we now live in a better world, in that millennialist paradise we were promised. Nope, definitely not. And the rest is history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave us a big like. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.